So, good evening and afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Mustafa. I'm the Senior Partner Solutions Architect at MENA for AWS for MENA, and it's my pleasure to be actually participating in this presentation with our partners. So very quickly, I personally will be talking about migrating to AWS and what also that entails, and the story will be continued then later on with Kloudr. All right. So when we're talking about AWS, it's always worthwhile to talk very briefly about the global infrastructure and what really is a pride and joy at AWS and why this is very beneficial for your activities. It's worthwhile noticing that this is actually prepared by Gartner. It's not ours, and we have been recognized as the cloud leader for the 9th year consecutively. So this has not actually happened beforehand. It's also this opens up the door for questions like, so why cloud infrastructure and why what's the secret sauce that AWS has, and why is it so prevalent in this day and age, and what we want, especially now with the changing of the world because of unfortunate things like COVID-19 and so on. And yes, we're promising to do all these really good things that you're seeing on the screen right now with practically unlimited scalability and really trying to reduce and lower your cost, but also maintaining maximum security. It is worthwhile also saying that, where is AWS? AWS is truly a global organization. And as you can see, we actually have regions, like 24 geographical regions all around the world, and we have 77 availability zones between them. And it's also worthwhile saying that we have 216 points of presence all around the world. This is very rapidly changing. This year we announced 2 new regions, and sure enough, they're online right now: Milan in Italy and Cape Town in South Africa. And this thing will continue and progress at a very fast rate. So what does AWS mean when they say region? Region with a capital R. Okay, there's a lot in the name itself. A region, and any specific region, is actually comprised of multiple availability zones. I'll get the definition of what an availability zone is in a moment. And it's, a region for us is really this conglomeration, this grouping of multiple data centers that define this availability zone. And the secret sauce really isn't the availability zone. An availability zone is typically more than one data center. And by this, we actually mean a building that has been invested in heavily by AWS. And this includes a lot of dark fiber, a lot of redundancy, a lot of resiliency in the actual building itself, not to mention. So unlike some other cloud providers that might have a rack down in some building, and they call that an availability zone or a region. Actually, a region means something very, very specific, and it's really designed for supreme uptime by AWS. And you can see from the connections here, it's fully interconnected. So if anything should happen, your workload would still be able to reach the internet and still reach your customers, more importantly. Now, in addition to this, as you can see between all the different points of presence that we have in all the different regions, AWS actually owns its own transit. It doesn't actually wait on somebody else. It doesn't really rent any sort of cables. All these cables you see on a global scale, that's actually owned by AWS. And it has redundant 100 gigabit Ethernet networks between everywhere. Now, the exception to this one is China, but that's because there are specific laws that are happening over there. Now, it's worthwhile to say, AWS takes a lot of pride and joy in not only its own data centers and its regions and its availability zones on a global scale, but we also have a multitude of services that are definitely beneficial to our customers. And this has been proven again and again and again repeatedly. And this is a very quick overview. I'll be touching on very quickly on migration to the cloud before I hand this over to my colleague Hassan. So when we're talking about migration, this actually touches on many, many, many things that are potentially possible from your current infrastructure and your current workloads onto AWS. I picked a few samples here and there just to give you a quick teaser on things. But AWS Database Migration as a service, referred to lovingly as AWS DMS, is one. It's extremely simple to use. You actually have no drivers to install, and it's very little. And because it works down at the block level, it actually automatically replicates the changes that you're seeing, and it can be used for continuous replication. So you don't really have we try as much as possible to have no downtime, but we can promise you minimal downtime, if any. And you start off from the source and you're moving all the items over to the target. And this is specifically on your database. Now, Here's something really cool about this thing here. It's not necessarily homogeneous database migration, meaning if it's, I mean, you can move SQL Server to straight to SQL Server, but you can also move MySQL Server to something else, or MongoDB to Amazon S3, or what have you. It depends what the target is. There are many sources and the many targets. It's a very worthwhile service to look at, to be honest. And more than that, we're actually offering, it does promise working very hard to actually maintain low cost. And if we're talking about like a sampling here, by what we're talking about, migrating 1 terabyte of data or on a database here is under $65. So it's actually $63.84. Now, please understand these pricings are a bit regional, so things will change between different regions. Minor changes, but the idea remains the same. So we talked about databases really quickly. Let's talk about migrating data. This, because not all the data that you have is actually maintained in a database. You might have files and whatnot. And sure enough, we have something called Kloudr. Now, Kloudr is another migration tool that we have, and it does allow um, for continuous replication and across pretty much anything, including databases. So if you have a SAN or a NAS or some kind of disk-based storage in your backend in your office, and you need to migrate all that wholesale onto AWS, regardless if it's going to an EC2 instance, the equivalent of your VM, or if you're moving onto some other kind of storage in AWS, that's perfectly fine. Cloud can do all that for you and then some. It also offers very wide platform support. It can run it. I mean, we say any application. I mean, I honestly have not come across anything that is not capable of backing up or migrating, I should say. Pretty much any database. It can run pretty much on any operating system that we want, and it doesn't really matter which. You're not constrained by any infrastructure that you're talking from starting off. And so it can be your standard storage, sorry, physical servers right now, or if you're on an alternative cloud, or if you're using your own VMware uh, uh, Hyper-V looking for Microsoft, you're perfectly fine. You're good to go to shift anything and everything. But that's not all. And there's also Storage Gateway. Storage Gateway is an appliance that you actually have locally installed, and then it actually showcases itself in one of multiple facets. And it's specifically designed to actually help shift you all your on-premises workloads data onto AWS. And there's a storage gateway that comes in one facet here. Well, generally speaking, here it just moves everything onto AWS, either to your S3 buckets or your various databases, or even AWS backup in and of itself. And at the same time, it actually can be monitored. Now, Storage Gateway, like I said, comes in 3 different facets: File Gateway, Volume Gateway, and Tape Gateway. From the name, you can tell, File Gateway is really for your NAS, you're moving your files. Your Volume Gateway, SAN, volumes, or even local disk, if you will, anything that's block storage essentially. And your Tape Gateway, so your virtual tape library, that can be shifted as well, no problem. But I'd be remiss in not actually touching on one thing that's actually proving to be a real door opener and an eye opener in many cases for most of the organizations that are interested in migrating to AWS, because it's not just simply about the infrastructure. It's also about transforming and modernizing your applications and really taking on this modern application architectures and taking best advantage of the various services that are available for you on AWS. So very briefly, and a very top level, monolithic applications are just, they're everything plus the kitchen sink, as we say back home in Canada. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to devolve this monolith and really break it up into multiple microservices. And individually, each microservice, it doesn't have the same scope creep that you had with the monolith. It focuses on one thing and one thing only, and it does it really, really well. But at the same time, it's not only talking about the application architecture, we're talking about the standard application architecture from its facet on servers. So you have your web servers with your application servers and your database servers, and that's great. You can lift and shift as is, but you're still not taking not taking advantage of anything here. A modern 3-tier application, however, actually defines a presentation tier, a business logic tier, and then your data. And now the glue between the data is actually probably something like a queue. All throughout, you actually have inter microservice communication here happening via API. And one is actually, an event triggers the other's action. How do you actually get there? Well, there's a bit of a computing evolution that's happening. And this is where we're defining the paradigm shift that we're seeing. So we're starting out with physical machines. This is where I cut my teeth into this world of technology and so on, like 20 years ago, 25 actually. And there's a lot of guessing, like I said, when we read the sizing there. So we're not doing any more guessing. We're just simply saying, you know what, we have enough data uh, with virtual machines. This one virtual machine, because computers are so capable, they should be able to actually handle that workload in its entirety. Virtual machines came with hardware independence because a VM is a VM. It doesn't really matter what the underlying machine was that's running it. But as you got the guarantee that you can run the virtual machine itself, it's fine. This actually started to afford you some agility and a bit faster speed, and definitely a lot of reduced maintenance. Golden images, for example, is a very good way. Now, this is where you're starting to shift your capital expenditure to more operational expenditure materials. These two words are fairly important because they help drive your costs down. It simply means you don't have to pay upfront to acquire everything that you need. It's just simply you're paying for what you're using. Now, it doesn't stop there. Science and technology progresses, and now we're at containerization. Now, not only are we even doing it at a more granular level, a container definitely requires less resources to run than your average VM. So you've actually also, so that's cheaper right there. It's also faster to deploy because you're no longer having to install everything from the operating system all the way up. And you definitely have better density on your actual servers that are being consumed here. So you do have a lot of high resource utilization here. What's more important is it's actually much faster to start a container than it is to start a VM because you don't have that hit of actually starting everything from the operating system all the way up. So it actually does offer you much more consistent runtime. Now we're progressing on to something that's even more interesting. So containers, we can run them on AWS Fargate. But if you've gone ahead and from there, you don't even have to guess what the underlying infrastructure is for you. AWS will go ahead and take that challenge for you. You don't have to administer that. You're just simply providing AWS Fargate with the actual containers, and that's it. It will scale automatically as you require, or as your workload requires, I should say. More than that, if you're actually progressing all the way down to starting using Fargate, we're seeing a lot of organizations and customers to start shifting more towards Lambda, or these function as a service is a name that I've heard being used locally here in the Middle East. And it's definitely continuous thing. It's really designed for fault tolerance. And more importantly, you have zero maintenance. And even better, you're only paying for what you're consuming here. So if you're using things for a microsecond, you're only paying for that microsecond. Here's a last tidbit I'm going to use, right? Because this is very prevalent in the Middle East. Um, Windows licenses by cloud provider. I'm just simply say the overwhelming majority on a global scale are actually being run by AWS. And with that, typically I'd be stopping for questions and answers, but I'll be handing over the torch to my colleague Hassan, and he can actually handle that. And I thank everybody very much. Okay, Hassan, she's all yours.
Gasan, are you able to share the screen?
Yes. Okay.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Now.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Services for migrating the data to AWS. Briefly speaking, my name is Hassan Matni, a cloud expert at Kloudr, which is a multi-cloud managed services provider. I'm an AWS Solutions Architect certified, and I've been implemented complex solutions and migrations on AWS, covering most of their services. In this session, we will be talking about different migration strategies and approach to migrate your workload from on-premise environments to Amazon Web Services. is your major concerns, or what is really first concern? We hear about a new major breach.
Ghassan,
I'm sure
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your voice is breaking. Ghassan, are you able to hear me?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. It's still breaking or it's fine?
It's still breaking, Ghassan.
Okay, just allow me a second.
I think it's better now.
Okay, now it's better. Sorry for that. In 2017, Maersk IT systems worldwide were down due to a ransomware attack that cost the company $300 million. 4,000 their data. So what if we have access to a more robust security infrastructure that would allow us to avoid such catastrophic events? Now let's move to the second concern, which is the infrastructure. I'm sure that none of your data centers look like this one. I hope not. But I'm not sure. I'm sure that everyone have had issues with power, UPS, and server. If you responsibility. You don't need to worry about the data center cable management, the physical access management. The concern more
Ghassan, are you
when they
using a headphone? I'm sorry, but are you using a headphone?
to
Ghassan, are you there?
yes, I'm here. It's still breaking.
Yes, yes, it is. If you're using a headphone, you can might as well not use. Hello, Ghassan.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, Ghassan, I can hear you. Hello?
Yes, can you hear me now? I changed the headphones.
Yes, yes, I can hear you now.